Avon Tyres Image Wheels Intermarque silhouettes were back in action at Lydden Hill towards the end of July 2022. Unfortunately, only 8 cars would take to the track this weekend after a number of entries would withdraw in the days preceding the event. But as the old saying goes, you only need 2 cars for a motor race, and we had some spectacular action at Lydden Hill this weekend, even with the smaller than average entry. Qualifying saw a slightly surprising pole position. Senior runner Mick Robertson in his Volkswagen Corrado would be fastest, who'd just rushed back from Spain to support the series. Alongside him will be Daniel Smith in the Mercedes SLK, ahead of Colin Smith in the Ginetta, Paul Knight in the Vauxhall Tigra. Row 3 would see Brian Laram coming back once more to Lydden Hill after an unfortunate incident last year. And even with the 8 cars on the grid, we saw great variety on the grid. We also had the Mitsubishi Colt of Philip Young alongside Brian Laram. And the final row of the grid would be the cheerful German visitor Volker Timm in his Audi TT, followed by local man John Stewart in the Mercedes. So the qualifying order was Mick Robertson on pole position with a 44.097. 30 thousandths of a second back would be Daniel Smith. Both of these drivers were leading their respective classes, Robertson being in the seniors. Third place would be Colin Smith, followed by Paul Knight and Brian Laram in the top 5. Philip Young would be in 6th position, followed by Volker Timm and John Stewart. The top 4 drivers only being separated by 7/10 of a second gave us the prospect of a really interesting race here at Lydden Hill. It would be Daniel Smith who got off to the best start on the first lap of race number 1. He got ahead of Robertson, who was still hanging on to 2nd place. The Volkswagen Corrado had started to develop a bit of oversteer as the race had gone on, so Mick would be fighting off the challenge from Knight behind. Paul would get by on lap number 4, and 2 laps later Robertson lost out to Colin Smith too. The Ginetta driver had closed in on Knight, then took 2nd position on lap number 9. Unfortunately, soon after, Robertson would retire from the race as the handling of his Volkswagen would continue to get worse and worse. It would later transpire that a couple of link bars had bent rather badly, developing this rather unique handling characteristic. This brought Mr. Cheese himself into 4th place, but just behind him was a great scrap between Stewart, Laram and Timm. Volker had moved past Brian on lap number 13 into 6th position and then overtook Stewart 2 laps later. However, the Paddockwood-based driver would not let that settle. A few laps later, he managed to fight back on the last lap of the race and make his move into the hairpin to take a well-earned 5th position. So the classification for the first race of the day. It was Daniel Smith taking the win after a dominant drive, although he only finished 3.8 seconds ahead of Colin Smith in his Ginetta. Paul Knight was the leading senior in 3rd place overall, a great result for him in his Vauxhall Tigra. Philip Young would be next in the Mitsubishi Colt, followed by John Stewart, the 2nd place senior runner, Volker Timm taking a podium within class once more, and Brian Laram 7th place. 5th through 7th would be separated by just over a second, so some great battling towards the back of the pack. Great stuff from Stewart, Timm and Laram. Our only retirement from this first race of the day would be Mick Robertson, which was incredibly unfortunate after taking a great pole position. So for the second race of the day, we had the usual reverse grid. With less than 10 starters, we only saw the top 4 drivers reversed. This would see Young on pole position ahead of Knight, and unfortunately we were missing Robertson and Laram. Daniel Smith made a fantastic start and would get back the lead on lap number 1, with Knight holding on to 2nd position and Young currently in 3rd. Timm, who has had quite a lot of bad luck this season with his car, was another early retirement, and 1 lap later he was followed by Stewart. This would only leave 4 drivers running at the end of this race, but thankfully these would all finish. It was another dominant drive for Daniel Smith, certainly helping his chances of being up there in the series championship. Although we only had 4 finishers here for this last race of the day, the 4 cars would be separated by just 7.5 seconds. It would be Daniel Smith taking the win, his best lap coming near the start on lap number 2 of 44.688. He was just 4.3 seconds ahead of Paul Knight, who was the leading senior runner. Next would be Colin Smith in the 491 Ginetta. He was ahead of Philip Young in the Mitsubishi Colt. Those last 2 cars only separated by 0.4 of a second at the line. Some fantastic swabbles there at the end of the race. Our 2 retirements were John Stewart in the Mercedes and Volker Tim in his Audi TT. Both of those happening in the first few laps of the race. There will be a much bigger field for the next round of the season, which take place at Brands Hatch on the 21st of August. This is part of the Vauxhall Vowles meeting, which is going to be very exciting. First time we'll be racing with them. So be sure to get your entries in. A massive thank you to everyone that turned up to Lydden Hill and everyone that has supported the series so far. We look forward to seeing you at Brands Hatch for yet more fantastic racing with the A1 Tyres Image Wheeled Intermarque silhouette.